I'm reading chapter 18 from my book, It's Not a Boy. And this chapter is called Across the Water. A lot of adventures over the water. There was something I didn't tell you about when Great Auntie Dolly was dying, but I had started to think about it more lately. It happened when Auntie Dolly from Sunnyside was waiting to die, and she just couldn't. No matter what she did, she just sat near the fire, getting colder and colder and thinner, and just could not die. She sat there and moaned, "Help me across, Dilly." And I whispered to my mam to tell me what she meant. And Mam said that Dolly wanted to go to heaven and be safe, but she just couldn't get across that water that was dividing earth and heaven. She could not find a bridge, and she could not find a boat. She couldn't swim either. None of us could. And so she cried over and over again to her dead sister, "Help me, Dilly." Of course, in the end, she did die, and maybe Great Auntie Dilly had heard her and helped her somehow. So Dolly was safe across the water now. But once, when I was a long way from home, something awful happened to me across the water, and I wasn't safe at all. It all started with Miss McBride, our teacher, who was going to get married in the summer holidays to Mr. Gray. Charlie started laughing and sniggering about them getting married. He wasn't thinking that she would be changing her name to Mrs. Gray. That didn't seem very funny. He kept nudging and winking at the other kids, and I didn't know why he was. I didn't realize what could be so funny about getting married. Miss McBride didn't talk to us about it, of course, because of Charlie's laughing and sniggering. But Mr. Gray told his class that after they were married, they were going on honeymoon to Scotland. And that would be their big holiday in the summer. Mam had always wanted to go on a big holiday, and she tried to persuade Dad to take us all. But as you know, we'd never been on a long holiday because Dad could just not leave his farm. Even when he went up to Scotland, he came back as quickly as he could because he loved looking after his animals. "East, west, home's best," he said. That was another of his sayings, and so all we ever did was go out for a day, perhaps on a Sunday school trip once a year without him. But then suddenly Mam persuaded him to go. We were going on a proper holiday. I don't know how she did it, but she did, and we were going to our Uncle Teddy's house with Auntie Gladys' house for a whole week. We were going to Norfolk, and I had never been out of Yorkshire before. I couldn't wait to go. But we hadn't finished school yet, and our term seemed to go on forever and never end. Then one morning, while we were still at school, we heard that we were going on a nature walk with Mr. Gray's class. We walked for miles and miles through the fields. We went on and on to the countryside. I didn't recognize it at all. Mr. Gray and Miss McBride were walking close together and smiling at each other, and they hardly seemed to notice us. We didn't do any nature notes or anything like that. We just carried on larking about, and they didn't look. And Charlie started kicking up dry mud and stones. And then we all did it. And we only got told off once when Charlie kicked something into Fatty's face, and Fatty yelped. On and on we went. Then all of a sudden, a really funny thing happened. I saw our house. It was in the distance, but it was our house all right. I was good at seeing in the distance, and I'd put it on my what I'm good at list ages ago. I could even see our conker tree, and our woods, and our little front door that was just like a speck. "There's our house!" I shouted, pointing, and everybody crowded round to look. You could see about 4 fields in front, and then there was our house. Miss McBride, who now was kind and mild, came to look, and she said what a nice house it was, and if she could have a house like that after she was married, she'd be very happy indeed. I wasn't very happy though now, because I was getting tired, and it's getting late, and if we got back late to our school, I would miss the bus, and I would have to wait for the next, or walk home on our main road, and it would take me ages. Then, in a flash, I had a good idea. "Can I walk over the fields to our house, Miss McBride?" I said. "It's not far. Look, I could easily get there before you're all back to school." Miss McBride called to Mr. Gray to help her decide. He smiled and put his hand on my shoulder, shaded his eyes, and looked over to our house. "I can't see that there would be any harm in you walking there. But are you sure that's your house?" he asked gently. Was I sure? Of course I was sure. I knew our house when I saw it, with my very good eyes. So it was decided I could go, and I set off to walk home on my own across the fields. I saw my class turn round, and they all waved and shouted, and very soon they were a long way off, and they looked like little specks even to my good eyes. I was soon across one field. I crossed another, and then another. I kept looking at our house, but funnily enough, it didn't seem to get any nearer. I rushed on and on. Then I realized that there were more than 4 fields. Of course, there were loads more, in fact. I had crossed twice that number and still seemed no nearer to our house. I just did not know what to do. Too late, I realized that because our land was flat, the faraway fields looked just like thin black lines in the distance, but really they were wide open spaces hiding behind each other. I was crossing field after field and never seemed to get anywhere. It was a great shock to me, and I got quite frightened. After a long time and a lot more walking, though, our house did seem a bit nearer at last, and I could see our front door, and it wasn't a speck any more. I could see our bottom field. I could see Hospaster, where big Billy Bull was buried, and I could see our paddock, where we kept our sheep in the winter. But then I had another big shock. Just when I walked over one last field before I got onto our own field and to safety, I came across our big, deep drain, and I was on the wrong side. I had completely forgotten that our drain was there, and I wouldn't be able to cross it. I stood frozen on the bank, staring in disbelief. I could hear the grasses whispering and sniggering all round me. I was on the wrong side, and there was no way across. I knew there was no bridge. There was no need for a bridge. Our land was all on the other side, and we'd never needed to go across to the field I was in, and we needed a bridge now. The murky brown water sloped past me, wide and deep. I couldn't swim, of course, none of us could, and I wished that Great Aunt Dilly was there to help me, like she was for her sister. I didn't know what to do. I glanced behind me, but I knew that it was too late to go back. I'd never catch our class up, even if I knew where to go. Just then I heard a train rattle over our railway line on its way to Ringham, and in a flash I had an idea that came into my head. There must be a rail bridge over our drain, somewhere for that train to get over to get to Ringham. I ran to see if I could find it. I was lucky, and I did find it, not too far away, but it was very dangerous because I had to squeeze through a tight wire railway fence. And I remembered what happened to Freddie Lowe and how he was squashed and splattered by a train. But I put my head onto the rail like Terry showed me to listen for trains. There was no train coming, so I crossed over our drain on the railway bridge and then ran along the rail sleepers, 1, 2, 3, jumping as I went. I crawled under another fence and I was in our field. Soon after that, I was in our house. Of course, I was very late, what with all that walking and all those fields that I hadn't known were there. And then, of course, trying to cross our drain. Mum and Dad were already milking our cows, and Katie and Gwendy had eaten their tea and mine was cold. But anyway, at least I was safe, and I could settle down and look forward to my lessons tomorrow, because Miss McBride had said that we were doing poetry, and I had never done poetry with her before. Miss McBride read us a poem called Ferry Me Across the Water, and I listened carefully because I was thinking about the holiday we were going to have. You see, Ma'am told me that to go on our holiday to Norfolk we had to cross over the River Humber, and we had to go on a ferry, and there would be a boatman. So you can see how I took great interest in this poem that Miss McBride was reading. Ferry me across the water, do, boatman, do. I was dreaming about our holiday, and it seemed as if school could not end soon enough.